Great. Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the ISPIC participants and teams to the 22nd webinar of the India Smart Protein Innovation Challenge 2021 Inspiration Webinar Series. We have planned a series of regulatory webinars to equip you and give you an overview of the various legal considerations as you are forming your products and developing your go-to market strategy. I am Radhika Ramesh, Policy Associate working at GFI India, and I will be hosting this exciting session tonight. We also have Shardul Dabir, our innovation specialist, and Satvika Mahajan, our policy specialist, who will be my co-host for this webinar. Before we begin, I'd just like to go over a few things. The rules of the engagement for this webinar is that you may utilize the Q&A button for questions to the speaker. Feel free to use the chat box to post your questions, and just please make sure that you restrict them to the topics discussed. Please ensure that your mics are muted throughout the presentation. Post the presentation by the speaker, we would conduct a Q&A session. You may utilize the raise hand feature at the bottom of your computer or phone screen if you want to post a question directly, and we will unmute you to ask your question. Today's regulatory webinar is conducted by one of GFI India's Regulatory Advisory Council member. The Regulatory Advisory Council has been assembled by GFI India to build regulatory capacity in the smart protein sector for the benefit of the industry and to share inputs with regulators on emerging developments. It consists of legal and regulatory experts from India who have experience across different legal themes such as food laws, intellectual property rights, company law, and other legal compliances that are needed to operate a food business in the alternative protein sector in India. Today, we have with us Mr. Gursahani, partner at PLR Chambers, a public policy and a legal consulting firm based out of New Delhi. Harsh has a background in international trade laws, international economic laws, food regulations, and compliances. Harsh is also an advocate and counsel in the Bombay High Court and has experience in litigation and dispute resolution. Harsh is also a public policy expert with in-depth knowledge of the government and participates in policy advisory to bodies such as the FSSAI. A very warm welcome to you, Harsh, and thank you for being a part of the ISPIC Knowledge Series to share your insights with our participants. Today's webinar will be focused on the important food regulations and compliances that are applicable to the production, manufacture, and sale of your alternative protein products. The objective of the webinar is to help you navigate the food regulatory landscape and compliance requirements associated with those regulations. Some of the points we would cover today would include an overview of the important food regulations, important regulatory authorities, different food categories, labeling, important export procedures, timelines, and the processes to bring your product to market. Before we move into today's session, I would like to hand over to Shardul to set some context about ISPIC.
Thank you so much. We can go on to the next slide. So before we begin with this excellent session, I just wanted to thank Harsh for joining us and Maria from PLR for joining us. And also a big thank you to all our sponsors, title sponsor, Capri Global, key sponsors, Nice and Alchem Foundation, and organizing partner, CIICO at IIM Ahmedabad, along with our academic and research partners and so in the supporting partners from our research and academic landscape all over India, IITs, NIFTM, Sign Incubator, ABLE, CCMB, CCAMP, and BIRAC. Also, a big thank you to all our smart protein ecosystem partners who are going to help a lot of you post-challenge in commercializing your ideas and the support that you would need to navigate the novel, at the same time, emerging smart protein ecosystem in India. So having said that, just a quick overview of the candidate cohort this year in the next slide that I want to tell Harsh before he starts with the presentation. We started with almost 750 people at the start of the challenge, and after a 3-month journey, we are now left with almost 150 people. That's 53 teams which are working on plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy seafood, plant-based ingredients, at the same time fermentation-derived meat, eggs, and dairy seafood, and cultivated meat, eggs, and dairy seafood solutions. So across these diverse areas, people from all over India with more than almost 24 states representation, 60 cities, and 100 plus colleges, unique organizations. We have part of this 150 candidates. So there's a lot of diversity, and I just wanted to give you a quick update on who our intended audience for today is. But I think without further ado, we can go on to Harsh and start with the session.
Thanks, Shardul. I think, Harsh, I'll just stop sharing my screen and then you can share it as well.
You'll have to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry. Thanks, Shardul. Thanks, Radhika. Um, just a quick note, the Maria is sharing the screen. Just to give, and first of all, I would actually extend my gratitude to GFI India for organizing such a session and the Smart Protein challenge. I think it's very relevant to this point in time as well, with the shift in preferences of consumers to move from either meat products to vegan products, or to actually have plant-based products circulate in the market. I think it's a great innovative step, and I would also like to thank GFI India for organizing this session and inviting me to give a brief overview of the regulatory framework that is applicable to food products in India. Um, So just to give you a broad context of how FSSAI came into being first, if the participants allow me to give a brief history. Maria, next slide, please. So prior to 2006, when the FSS Act came or was adopted by the Parliament, food products were regulated in a very haphazard manner. They were all scattered in multiple regulations. These were commonly known as product orders. Each product was, or each category of products was regulated separately. FSSAI, FSS Act 2006 actually consolidated all these regulations under one umbrella and set up a specialized agency called FSSAI, which regulates food products today. In order for FSSAI to function, apart from just the act, they also required rules and regulations. These rules and regulations were adopted in 2011, and since 2011 it's FSSAI, which is the central authority that regulates everything for food. The enforcement of these regulations are done by the state authorities, FDAs in each state. Next slide, please. So the broader framework is it's an umbrella structure like any other regulation. The most important piece of legislation is the Food Safety and Standards Act, FSS Act 2006, under which there are rules which give out the procedural nuances of how the act is to be implemented. Under the rules, there are regulations which govern every different aspect of the food products. These these range from licensing, where how a food business operator can actually start production, how do they get a license, to standards, what can go into a food product, how or where, how can the government restrict the innovation that the industry is trying to bring about, as well as there are notified laboratories which check to ensure that the food products that are coming into the market are of the standard that they mention. They also regulate how or what needs to be put on the labels of the food products, as well as if you're importing products. So each aspect of the food business is regulated through separate regulations, and we'll come to the regulations in detail in the subsequent slides. First, and the most important aspect of food business is the permission to actually have a food business running. In order to get a food business up and running, you require a license from FSSAI. I'll take one step back and explain that under the licenses categories as well, there is one major difference for small or petty food manufacturers whose turnover is less than 12 lakhs, or are hawkers without a permanent establishment, going and selling food from door to door, fall under a category of registration. They don't require a license. It's just a simple registration which is issued in the name of the person carrying out the business, the hawker, or so on and so forth. We understand that at least among the participants today, you would not be falling in the category of registration. You all would require a license. Licenses as well is divided into two broad categories. One is a state license, which the state authorities look at and issue. The second is the central authority, central license, which is issued by the central licensing authority. Now, licenses per se, and I'll come to the differences where you get into a state license or a central license in a short bit, but licenses is not that simple. It's not that you can go ahead and go to an RTO and get a driving license. It's a little more complicated than that. FSSAI regulates every aspect of food business. So you may require a different license depending on the kind of business that you're running. So I'll give you an example here. If you are storing food products, you would require a storage license. If you're a mere trader, you are, let's take an example of a shop that you see down the street from your house, who is selling food products as well. They require an FSSAI license. They require a retailer kind of business license. If you're actually manufacturing food, prepackaged commodities, prepackaged food material, or manufacturing products, food products which need to be sold in a commercial facility, those would require a manufacturing license. If you are only running a eatery, for example, or a restaurant, then you would require a restaurant kind of business license from FSSAI. And FSSAI has different criterias. They require different documentation for each type of product or each type of business that you're carrying out. And this forms the basis of identifying at the first level as to what license would you require. The second set of requirements that come in order to determine what kind of license that a food business entrepreneur like yourself would require is the kind of products that are being made. Now, in the kind of products as well, there are three main different broad product categorization. One is the standard food products. Second is proprietary food, and third is novel foods. And we'll come to the details of each of this in the next slide. Before we go on to the next slide, I promise to give you a heads up on who falls under a central category and who falls under the state category. Now, while the regulations stipulate that all the kind of businesses that are mentioned in Schedule 1 of the licensing regulation fall under a central category. Now, while this distinction may not make direct sense to a food entrepreneur, but basically they wanted to split the licenses into these two buckets, where lesser complicated licenses could be issued by state authorities, and a more highly regulated industry, say for example, oil business or larger slaughterhouses, or anyone making a new product which is not regulated per se, falls under the central category. If somebody is making, say, nutraceuticals, where you're providing sufficient additional nutrients, say vitamin D supplement, which falls under the food category, would also go under the central licensing category. But we'll, as the discussion progresses today, we'll get into more nuances, and we just wanted you to keep this framework in the back of your mind, that there are different categories, different authorities that issue licenses, which is center and state. The licenses are issued on the basis of the kind of business that the food business entrepreneur is carrying out. Licenses are location specific, so your kind of business would also be determined on the activity that is being carried out at that specific location for which you are applying for your license. And the third aspect that regulates what kind of license you have to apply for are the product classification. We'll, Maria, next slide. So as I was mentioning, that there are three types of products. First is, of course, a standardized product. So what's a standardized product? The standardized product is basically any product that has a standard that is given within the regulations. How the regulations look at food product standards are that there are around 600, 700 odd food products which have a fixed standard, which say, I'll take an example of peanut butter. Now, peanut butter is a standardized product, and they tell you FSSAI regulates all the aspects, saying that you need to add, you can add nuts to it, you need to have sugar in it, so on and so forth, and they give out a standard against which the product would be checked if FSSAI has to ensure that the product is safe for consumption. So any product that has a standard given under the food product standards and additives regulation 2011 falls under the standardized category. The second category, which would be relevant more for smart protein products as well, fall under the proprietary food products. Now, proprietary food products are products which contain ingredients that are otherwise permitted or are standardized. So if you I'll give you a very simple example of a proprietary food: potato chips. Now, potato chips, we've been consuming potato chips since whenever, as kids. Across the country, potato chips are very freely sold, but all potato chips are under the proprietary food category, primarily because FSSAI does not have a standard set for potato chips. So how does this product become a proprietary food? Well, since there is no standard, you can only have ingredients which are permitted. Now, what would a potato chips product have? It has potato, it's fried, so it has oil, it has seasoning that is added above. So potatoes are vegetables allowed, standardized food, it's allowed as a food product. Flavoring and seasoning also has standards which are allowed in to be used in proprietary food products. Oil, again, a standardized product which is used for frying the chips. So in order to determine, so if you're making a product that is per se using only standardized food, either standardized food products or is using products which are allowed to be used by FSSAI across, they would fall under proprietary food products. This is slightly different from novel food products. Maria, next slide, please. Novel food are also called non-specified foods. Now, what are novel foods, right? Novel foods are products which have no history of being consumed as food. For the first time, when plant protein was created to make a plant-based meat product, it is using a different technology. It uses different ingredients which may not have a history of being used in normal food products. These would fall under the novel food category. So if you use a new technology, fermentation, for example, as well, some type of fermentation, a newer form of fermentation, if you use different enzymes, can fall under a novel technology to produce a food product. Now, this is the third category, and these are, in one sense, specifically regulated by FSSAI at a different level. So if you are creating a new product, you would first need to get an approval from FSSAI to launch this product into the market. Once you get a food approval, and these would be applicable, as I mentioned earlier, to products which do not have a history of being used in India, you have to get the product approval. After getting the product approval, you can approach the Central Licensing Authority to get a license to manufacture this particular product. Rest of the process of getting the license follows as for any food business operator who requires a central license. The application for such a novel food product is made through Form 1, and there is a separate regulation that regulates this. You have to pay a certain fee to FSSAI and give documentation to support the fact that your product is indeed safe for being consumed. This has to be supplemented by lab reports from a recognized laboratory. If, for example, this product has been approved or is being used as food in other countries, those are additional information that can be provided to FSSAI. If who's going to be your target audience, if you're using novel technology, what is the novelty of the technology that you're using and how is it safe, is also additional information that needs to be provided. The product classification, or rather the documentation that is submitted, also needs to specify sort of a recipe that you'll be using. What is the limit of the additives that you're going to be adding in the product, so on and so forth. Once FSSAI examines all of this, they issue a product approval in Form 2, which is basically a sort of a certificate saying that yes, your product is safe to be sold in the Indian market. You may proceed to get a central license to to manufacture this product. Sorry. Once the approval is given, you can then log on and get the central license to manufacture your products. Normally, FSSAI takes approximately 6 months for you to give you a product approval. Those 6 months is an out. It's not an outer limit. They may have queries. Once you submit the information to FSSAI, they normally come back with questions as well, or they ask you to submit additional information through documentation, lab reports, history, so on and so forth. And it completely, the timeline is a little fluid, but it takes a minimum of 1 month. Mostly it takes 4 to 5 months, but 6 months is generally the timeline during which all queries also get addressed and FSSAI issues a product approval. Second relevant aspect that you may need to keep in mind is that you would require, FSSAI has a separate fee for product approval, which is 50,000 per product that needs to be paid to FSSAI directly to carry out the evaluation. Next slide, please. Now, sorry, Maria, just if you can go back to, now this is just to give you a brief idea as to what goes into getting a license. In order to get a license as well, there are certain documentation that are required. If you're going to be manufacturing food products, there is a set of documents which includes blueprints, machines that you're going to be using, your list of directors. All the information has to be submitted to FSSAI through their portal called FoSCos, through which a license application is made. FoSCos is an integrated portal where FSSAI authorities, whether central or state, interact with the applicant as well in post queries, to which you would need to reply to within 30 days from the time the query is raised, and post which a license is issued. The license is also available on your on your FoSCos portal, and you would need to display a copy of that at the manufacturing location. For different kind of food businesses that you would be carrying out, say if you're retailing, you would have a retail license which also needs to be displayed at every retail location. Now, this just gives a broader overview of how to get, or rather, what are the types of licenses that are applicable. We'll now get into the labeling aspect. And of course, once your product is ready, once you either have a standardized product or a proprietary food product or a novel food product with a product approval and you have a license, you would then need to understand aspects of how to put it out in the market. Yes, as Satvika correctly pointed out in as well, that most of the food products that the plant-based meat or plant-based milk or the products that you would be preparing fall under the proprietary food categories, primarily because they use ingredients that are already permitted. I'll if you want me to go a little bit into the detail, we'll take an example of, say, almond milk. Almond milk is prepared by crushing almond kernels and adding water to it. Water is a standardized ingredient. Almonds are standardized, and therefore the product that is made falls within the within a proprietary food category, because almond milk per se does not have a standard. Moving on to the labeling requirements. Now there are I also assume that your products are going to be coming into the market partly either later this year or later next year, depending on what stage of product development you all are at. By the time your product comes into the market, 1st of July, post 1st of July, there is a new labeling regulation that will come into being, and we'll focus more on that regulation rather than on the older regulations. So these regulations are called the Labeling and Display Regulations 2020. They replace the labeling regulations of 2011, which used to cover all the aspects. Now, most of the aspects and changes to these regulations have been put across in a consolidated regulation called Labeling and Display Regulations 2020. So there are certain mandatory declarations that you need to make on a pack. I am sure each one of you has picked up a food product from the market and said, okay, what does this contain? You would have looked at the backside of the food product. Now, in regulatory parlance, we call the backside of the food product the principal display panel. We call it principal display panel because that is where all the information has to be clubbed together and put in one place for the consumer to see. There are certain minimum criteria or minimum information that needs to be given. And if you pick up any product across the market that is today, you would see that these information would be provided on the principal display panel or on the front of pack, which can also be referred to as ad panel at times. First and the most important is the name of the food. Now, name of the food is, and this is not the trade name, this is not the name that you are marketing your product by. This is the product which, this is the name of the food which conveys to the consumer what to expect in the package. Now, for example, plant-based meat sausages or plant-based meat-free sausages would automatically convey to the consumer that this product has sausages which are made from plant-based and are meat-free. Now that would be the name of the product. Similarly, almond milk would be the name of the product. Just to correlate this with the licensing requirement as well. Now, while making a license or requesting for a license for a proprietary food product or a novel food product, you need to give a generic name that would be present on the label as well. These names are given to you in your license. They're normally FSSAI looks at what you're going to call your product as well. I'm sorry, and accordingly allows you or gives you the license to use that name. Now, these names need to be reflected on your label. Second most important thing is the list of ingredients. Now, list of ingredients are very common. They have to be given, you'll see this on all packages. They need to be given in a descending order of weight or composition. So if you pick up any product and you look at the list of ingredients, they would give you so the first aspect. Now, if we look at the example that we've put out on the screen as well, which is for instant pasta, cheese pasta maker, it says that, so the pasta is made from salmonella from wheat, and it has a cheese tastemaker whose first and the most important ingredient is milk and sugar blend mix. It's a compound ingredient, and that's the maximum in this particular cheese tastemaker that is available. So you have to give them in a descending order of weight. The next important thing is the nutritional information. Now, FSSAI has provided a manner in which you need to declare your nutritional information. This also has to be given in terms of a per 100 ml or per 100 grams of your package, plus an RDA, which is per serve. There is a difference. There is an exemption. You may not give a 100 gram or a 100 ml nutrition table if you are producing a single consumption pack. So if you pick up a juice package which is of 200 ml, they would give the nutritional information on 200 ml because that's a single consumption pack. You need to give a declaration of veg and non-veg logo. You need to put a logo on top. I'm assuming all smart protein products will have a green dot in a green square, which is the veg logo that needs to be provided. You need to give declarations in terms of your additives that you're adding. You also need to, and I'm sure you've picked up a food product and realized that, at times it is marketed by one person and it's manufactured by somebody else. These information needs to be declared on the label as well. So you would see marketed by, who's the brand owner of the license. They have something what we call the relabeler license, and this is applicable if you're getting your product manufactured from a third party. Or it would say manufactured by or manufactured and marketed by ABC, and it will give their address, and next to it would be an FSSAI logo with their license number. This is a mandatory requirement that needs to be there. Say if it's being manufactured at a separate location, the manufacturer's name and license number is also a mandatory requirement that needs to be present on the labels. Of course, apart from the FSSAI logo, name, information, there are certain additional information that needs to be put in, which is regulated not by FSSAI, but a different regulation called Legal Metrology Act of 2009 and its regulations. These require you to provide a net quantity, customer care details, and the maximum retail price. They have also modified the labeling regulation recently under legal metrology, and now you need to also give out a rate per gram or per ml along with the maximum retail price of the product. Apart from these aspects, the other important aspects are and other mandatory requirement as well include certain declarations, which are your lots, lot number, your manufacturing date, your use by date, so on and so forth. These are aspects which regulate a product traceability and recall management systems that you would put into place when you are commercially manufacturing a food product. This is to ensure that tomorrow, if there is a food safety issue, it will be easy for you all to identify where the product has gone and when to get it back. The date of manufacturing or packing, as well as the use by date, would convey to the consumer that till when can they use this product or safely consume it. There was a difference from the older regulation. The older regulation would give a best before declaration. A slight nuance that you may want to know: best before is a quality parameter. So if somebody says that this product will meet all the commercial parameters, crunchiness, so on and so forth, till a particular date, that falls under the best before. We have now moved in India from 1st of July, all products will carry a use by date, which is a safety parameter. So post the use by date, the product would not remain safe for consumption. So that's a nuance difference. under best before, the product would have continued to be safe to consume. It may just not meet the quality parameters that the manufacturer would be claiming. However, post July 1st, 2022, all food products will carry an expiry date. That's the last date at which they could the product would be safe for consumption. You also have allergen declarations and others product specific declarations, which may depend on the ingredients that you're having, so on and so forth. Maria, next slide, please. Now, we've already spoken about this, and just FYI, we are not promoting any particular brand by giving images. These images are only for educational purposes, and there's no commercial value, or we are not endorsing any particular product. Under the new regulations, the non-vegetarian mark has also changed. Instead of a circle, now it's a triangle in the same brown color that products would need to carry. Vegetarian logo is the same, which is a green dot and a green square. FSSAI has recently proposed a draft regulation for vegan food products as well. And we'll, if I may give you a brief background on these regulations as well. These regulations are still in draft. They're not applicable to products as of yet. Once they are notified in the Gazette, there would be a date of implementation, post which these vegan regulations would be applicable. Vegan food products would then carry a logo which FSSAI has proposed, which is displayed on the screen as well, which is a green V with a leaf in the center. Now, they also want vegan food products to establish and get a sort of an endorsement from FSSAI before using this logo. This would include ensuring or submitting that the product is vegan in all aspects. You need to show that the products, the ingredients that are going into these products are vegan as well. And after which you would be able to get a certificate endorsement to use the vegan logo. Please note that it's not de facto that you'll be able to use the vegan logo. You would need to establish that your product falls under the vegan category in order to use the logo. This would not prevent you, or rather what is mandatory is to carry the veg logo. If by any chance you get your products endorsed as vegan as well, it would mean that you would need to have the veg logo in addition to the vegan logo. It's not an alternative that is there. Next, I'm sure every one of you would have also seen that products make certain claims on your, I'm sorry. Moving on, just to give you a brief background, there is a separate regulation that regulates the claims. I am sorry if I can just pause for a second. So I'm sure when you have picked up a pack, you would have realized that there are certain claims that a lot of products make on the label. Now, FSSAI regulates these claims as well. One of the most important criteria of these claims is that these claims need to be truthful, unambiguous, meaningful, and they should not mislead the consumers. Now, so for example, you can't claim a product to be rich in vitamin D, for example, when the product contains no vitamin D. There are certain parameters which FSSAI has laid down in the claims regulation. And these are applicable to products. And in order to make a claim, you would need to satisfy these conditions that are given in the regulations. Now, these claims have also been divided into certain categories. These could include a comparative claim where you compare your product to other products that are available in market, or a nutrition claim basis what nutrition that product would provide. You can also make a health claim saying that this, say for example, vitamin A uh, is essential to prevent night blindness. Now that also comes in a reduction of disease claim, and these reduction of disease claims normally are applicable to vitamins and minerals that are added to your food products or are naturally present. Um, these also um, these regulations prevent you from making any other claim that may mislead a consumer. So you cannot make certain claims. There are criteria that are given, and these claims regulations are also applicable, for example, on your trademark name. I'll give you an example. Just if you pick up a can of real fruit juice. Now we all know that real fruit juice is a registered trademark for the company, and it does not mean that uh, you know the product may be real. Now in cases where there are claims, or rather when your name of the food product or your brand name can mislead, you're supposed to give an additional declaration on your um, pack as well. In the vegan regulations as well, the draft vegan regulations, which will once finalized and notified, which will come into the effect hopefully in a year's time, also give when can you make a legal claim, a vegan claim, and these parameters have also been defined. So when you're designing your product package, you need to keep in mind that it's not that you can make a claim in whichever manner that you would wish. These claims are regulated through the regulations, and you would need to comply with them when you are designing your final package. Just to give you an example, next slide, Maria. I would suggest next slide again. Yeah. So, for example, doctor approved, pure, or claiming that a product is FSSAI approved, or just because you have an FSSAI license saying that the safety is assured, are not allowed. Also, making using words like original, traditional, without meeting the conditions, these claims are not allowed to be made on the package. Next slide, please. Now, coming into the next set that we wanted to address is when you're importing a food product. Now, import is regulated through the FSS import regulations, and import regulations also have the FSS import regulations only regulate the food aspect of it. While importing a food product, there are a number of other requirements that you would need to comply with. First, of course, you would need to have a DGFT license or an IEC importer code. Before you do that, in order to get that, you need to have a company in place. It could be either a proprietorship or a partnership or a private limited company. You require these documents that would need to be submitted to DGFT to get an import exporter code. This code is required for you to file any documentations or interact with the customs authority. Once your basic importation process is in place and you're importing a food product, that's when the FSS import regulations come into play. Every package of imported food product is checked by FSSAI, and we'll come to the detailed process in a bit. But your product would need some of the basic conditions that you would need to ensure that while importing a product, the product would need to comply with is first that a product can only be imported if it has at least 60% of the shelf life available for the food product to come to be consumed by the consumers after importation. So if, for example, your a shelf life of your food product is 100 days, you need to ensure that the food product is manufactured and reaches the custom authorities within the first 40 days, so that at the time of importation into India, your product has at least 60 days for the product to be sold and consumed by the consumers. Another aspect that is very relevant before even looking at the product characteristics and parameters, FSSAI does a visual inspection. So if when you're importing a food product, it needs to comply with the labeling regulations. I'm sorry, it's labeling and display regulations 2020. Our mistake for the typo. These once the and actually, can we come to the next slide, which gives out the process for? Sorry, we'll come to this next, Maria. If you can come to the slide after this. Sorry, I think I'm okay. If we can go back. Yeah. While importing these products, your label is the first thing that your FSO looks at, and it needs to be compliant with the FSSAI labeling and display regulations, which are applicable to domestic products as well. We do understand, and FSSAI understands as well, that there are certain information that the manufacturer situated outside India may not have. These set of information are called rectifiable labeling deficiencies, which can be corrected at the time of import by placing a sticker. Under labeling regulations, stickers are not allowed until and unless your entire label is a sticker. So you cannot make declarations on your food products using stickers, except in certain conditions or certain cases. Now, for imported food products, there are certain information that needs to be present on the food product, and these can't be changed or modified. First of these is the date, or rather the best before or the use by date. This is a mandatory information. You need to carry the name of the food product, the name of the manufacturer, and the date of use by date. Manufacturing date, a lot of other countries also require. However, if that's not present, that information can be taken and put onto your rectifiable. It's a rectifiable labeling deficiency, which you can put a sticker on your product to comply with. So when you're importing, what are the other information that you would require? One is the name and address of the importer. The importer's FSSAI license number also needs to go in. You need veg, non-veg declaration. The logo is something that is only in India. So you would need to put the green dot with a square around it on your rectifiable defect as well, and the name of the food product subcategory if it's a little different. So for example, proprietary food products would need to specify that the food product that you're importing is a proprietary food, and where does it classify in the Indian Food Code. You can attach only one single label sticker, which comes right next to your preferably next to your principal display panel, where all the other information is given. Also, the requirement that FSSAI has put out is when you're putting a sticker, it should not change any of the existing information that is provided. Also, the sticker that you're adding to correct the deficiencies should not be in conflict with the declarations that are given on your on the food package itself. Just to give you a brief how the import process works is once you have your IC code and all your documentation, your import license in place, and you place the order, your food product comes into the country. At the customs location, you need to file all your documentation through a portal called SWIFT, where it connects in automatically to the FSSAI system as well, which is FICS, which is inbuilt into the SWIFT portal. So this is for ease of doing business. All documents need to be submitted on one portal, and whichever relevant authority is supposed to look at those products, then subsequently look at the product. Once you file a request for importation of a food product and it's arrived, FSSAI under FICS would generate a code. It will, a food safety officer will visit the customs spot and draw a sample from the product. Before drawing the sample, he would look at your label and say whether or not this, or rather, we call that as a visual inspection. On a visual inspection, if he feels that either there is a labeling deficiency or if there is some issue that is applicable onto the product which is visible at the time of seeing itself, if there is a labeling issue that is present, or if there is any other issue, if he looks at the ingredient list and says that there is an ingredient that is not permissible in India, or so on and so forth, the consignment would get rejected there itself. If the product, or if your consignment, if your packaged food product meets the primary visual inspection, he'll draw 2 samples which will go to a recognized laboratory for testing. And once the testing is complete, they would send it to FSSAI, the test results, and FSSAI would issue an NOC, which would also be available in the same system, which would allow the customs authority to finally process your consignment and allow it to be imported into the country. Next slide, please. Sorry. Yeah. So now I have already discussed about this when we were discussing the mandatory requirements for which are applicable to all products. This is applicable to both imported as well as domestically manufactured products. These specific there are 3 main requirements that come in from the Legal Metrology Act. One is declaration of, I'm sorry, I think there's a hand raised.
You can ignore that, Harsh.
Sorry. Yeah. So under the Legal Metrology Act and the packaged commodity rules specify certain additional information that needs to be present on every pre-packaged commodity. This extends above and beyond food products as well. And you would, if you pick up any product across which is in a pre-packed form, you will see that these 3 declarations are present on every package. First and most important is the quantity of the food or the product that is contained in the package. Now that is declared in standard units, which is grams or ml or so on and so forth. Legal metrology also provides a manner in which you need to declare this quantity on the label of the product. Second is Second is customer care details. Now, customer care details are in cases that if a consumer wants to raise a complaint or wants has any questions about the product, they should be able to reach either the manufacturer or the importer of the product. You need to therefore give your consumer care details, which includes your a phone number as well as an address as well as an email address. These can be given in association with the declarations that are mandatory under FSSAI. Say, for example, an imported product needs to carry the name and address of the importer. This can be clubbed together. Sorry, I think so these are the requirements that are presented through LM, which need to be present on every package that is being imported. there is also an overlap of the information that legal metrology requires with FSSAI. So if you're complying, say, LM also requires you to have a mandatory declaration of either the name of the manufacturer or the name of the importer of the product. These are also information that is required by the labeling and display regulations under the food under FSS labeling and display regulation. So there are a number of requirements which can be merged, and if you're complying with them, automatically you comply with the other regulations as well. Just a final note on legal metrology. The third aspect that legal metrology regulates is the selling price or the maximum retail price of a product. You need to declare it in a particular format which legal metrology has stipulated. They have now added another requirement to give a per gram or a per ml weight, which will come into effect again in a year's time. So you'll start seeing packages of food products as well as other products which will carry a per unit declaration of the maximum retail price as well. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you an example of how labels are. In imported food products specifically, you also need to give a declaration as to the country of origin. This is to determine where your product has been manufactured. Also, I'm sure you all know in today's day and age, in an era of global value chains, products need not be completely manufactured in one particular country. You may be sourcing your ingredients from multiple different countries and processing and packing them in different countries, depending on where your manufacturing facilities, where your packing facilities are located. In order to simplify and understand, at least for food products in India, to which country's name needs to be declared as the country of origin, FSSAI has clarified that wherever your harmonized system code of classification under your import, which is the HS code, changes, is where the country of origin changes. So if you're finally manufacturing a particular product which falls under categories, let's take an example of dairy. So for it'll be 0406, so on and so forth. It's an 8-digit code. Wherever it changes at 6-digit is where your product is considered originating from that particular country. And you would need to label it accordingly. In this particular example, if we see the first product is manufactured in India and the country of origin displayed is India. The second one is imported from the Netherlands, so it says country of origin as Netherlands. Just to give you an example, just to clarify on this as well, say if you import a product in bulk and repack it into smaller packs to be sold in India, the country of origin would continue to be the country from which you have, where the food product was actually manufactured and processed and sent to India in bulk. So mere repacking does not change the country of origin. Next slide, please, Maria. So I think we've already gone through the import requirements in detail. As I stated, FSSAI at the end of the inspection and testing of the food product issues an NOC. If by any chance you do not meet the requirements, if either labeling or in testing, FSSAI would not issue you an NOC, and therefore your product would not get cleared into the product. One other aspect of this importation, as well as in domestic, in the domestic market as well, there are certain storage requirements which your food products need to follow. These are also hygiene conditions. So just as, sorry, I'll take a step back and explain this for both. In terms of import, your food products need to be segregated and stored along with food products only. They're not supposed to come in contact with other uh, other items, other food products, which may cause cross contamination. As for health and safety reasons, you need to store them in accordance with the specified conditions. And FSSAI also has separate custom warehouses for equipped only to handle food products. Um, in order to maintain your hygiene requirements, you need to follow, and I'm sure you would have looked at packages of food products which give storage requirements as well. It's at times says store away from direct sunlight, store in a particular condition. If they're frozen food products, they say that store at 0 degrees or at minus 18 degrees, so on and so forth. These conditions of your food product need to be complied with. At time of import, if the FSO or the authorized officer who's inspecting your product realizes that it has not been stored, they are most likely to not grant you an NOC and reject your import consignment. For domestic products as well, where you have storage requirements that are given on products which are determined primarily by your manufacturer, throughout the chain of your food product leading up to the market and selling to the consumers, it needs to comply with those conditions. For frozen products, for example, you would need to ensure that you have a cold chain that maintains the temperature till the time it reaches a retailer and consequently sold to a consumer. This would include your transporter would need to have a chilled vehicle. Your transporter would also need to have an FSSAI license to transport products of that category. You would need to have your warehouses which have a license for a cold storage license, so that they maintain the temperature for your food product before it reaches the retailer. There are also other storage requirements and hygiene requirements that are stipulated within FSSAI as well. These are called the Schedule 4 requirements. These are actually annexed to your license. Every manufacturer, every storage unit, every food business operator has a separate set of conditions that they would need to comply with during the course of when undertaking food business operations. These at times are very simple requirements, which anyways you may follow as a good practice, which is, storing your food products away from non-food items, ensuring that food products as well are stored separately so that there is no cross-contamination of food products. They are stored in a clean and a hygienic manner, so on and so forth. And these hygiene conditions are also periodically examined by FSOs who come and inspect food business premises and verify that you're complying with these conditions. If you don't comply with these conditions, they would issue you an improvement notice to rectify the errors in the first go, or if it is too grave, they may suspend your license or cancel your FSSAI license. Next slide, please. So there is also a separate category for import, especially if you're importing for research and development. And this is just, though it may not be applicable to most of y'all, but since y'all are carrying out or rather preparing and creating new products, there may be products that are available in another market that you may import just for research purposes as well. For importing a food product for research as well, you need an FSSAI import license. Once the product reaches, you need to give a declaration under Form 9, which basically states that these particular products would not be released into the market and are only for research and development purpose for your own use. Accordingly, and the authorized officer will issue you an NOC after looking at the food product if it meets all the criteria that are stipulated in the regulations, and consequently you can import the product in. You have to complete the custom procedure within 30 days, beyond which the consignment may be discarded or additional charges may be imposed on to the importer. Next slide, please. So this is also, we wanted to give a brief overview of importation of other food products as well, specifically products which do not fall under prepackaged food products. So if your product is not being manufactured and packed outside, and you're importing, say, grains or agricultural commodities, there are certain separate set of requirements that your product needs to comply as well, and certain additional NOCs or permissions that you would require for raw agricultural commodities. At least one additional requirement that your product may need to comply with is plant quarantine, which is an NOC from the plant quarantine department. Plant quarantine department primarily looks at sanitary and phytosanitary measures that India imposes. It basically is to restrict any pest or disease or any other. So let's take a grain, for example. I don't know if you know about, I'm forgetting what's the name, but in colloquial terms, at least in Maharashtra, we refer to a grass that is very widely present called the Congress grass. This grass was actually imported from the US along with wheat before when US donated aid during the famine of early 70s to India. The grains were actually contaminated with this grass, and once these grains came into India, the grass rapidly spread across the country. And in order to prevent something like this from coming in, the plant quarantine department normally examines raw agricultural commodities to ensure that there is no external pests or disease that your product is bringing in. You need to get a NOC from the plant quarantine department as well. So this may be applicable not only to raw agricultural commodities, but also semi-processed agricultural commodities. And it's a simple process. You need to file a form, and the plant quarantine department will examine your import consignment and issue an NOC. Similarly, from FSSAI, specifically for novel food products, you need to have your novel food products approval prior to importation. As we had discussed in detail earlier in the session, when you have a novel food product, you need to get a novel food approval or an approval from FSSAI before getting your license. While you may have an import license which allows you to import products that are allowed generally, for novel food products, you would also need to have a product approval in place while you're importing the food product for commercial purposes. We have, I think we can move to the next slide. The license process that was given is already something that we had discussed. Now, I'm also assuming that number of y'all would be exporting food products that you may manufacture from, that you may have a manufacturing facility in India and then export it outside. Now, FSSAI technically is not supposed to regulate exported food products, at least in terms of quality and the standard. Now, in order to manufacture a food product intended for a a separate country, the regulations that your food product would need to comply with are the regulations that are applicable in that country. Just as when you were importing food product into India, FSSAI looks at these products and tests them to ensure that they meet the safety and the requirements of the Indian legislations. The importing country, when exporting from India, would have their own set of rules and regulations which would be applicable to the product. Sometimes these regulations may be different from the ones that are applicable in India. There may also be conflicting regulations. In order to do that, you do not you need to ensure that when you're exporting a food product, that it complies with the requirements of the importing country. In order to get that, you need to have an exporter license from FSSAI when you're manufacturing such products. You also give an undertaking to FSSAI that these products that are to be exported to the other country will meet the requirements of that country and would not meet the parameters within FSSAI. That's basically to state that, look, our products are going to be labeled and will comply with the regulations of the other country. Having this license would ensure that FSSAI would not pick up your sample. If you're manufacturing a product meant for an export market, it may not meet the FSSAI requirements in terms of the ingredients that may be permitted, limits, so on and so forth. It may also not be labeled according to Indian regulations, which is why you do not want FSSAI to come and say that your product is non-compliant when it is in India. You would need to get a FSSAI license under an export category and export these products. You would need to give an undertaking as well to ensure that these products would not be sold in the domestic market and would only be sold outside India. I think this covers most of the part that we wanted to inform you on. It gives you a broad overview of the licensing regulation, product classification, and import and export procedure. I think we can open the floor for questions that the participants might have as well.
Thank you so much, Harsh, for that presentation. I think that was very detailed and very helpful. We do have a few questions that we were able to answer on the chat, but we can just go through some of them right now.
Yeah, so before getting into questions, I'd love to invite Satvika to just share her thoughts to kind of just close out the session with additional insights so that we can switch off the recording and everybody who's watching this recording later on is able to also refer back to this as a very excellent presentation of all of the key insights. We've talked about so many different things, different laws applicable, different good practices to keep in mind. So I'm sure this is going to be a valuable resource for the community. So Satvika, on to you.
Thank you, Shardul, and thanks so much, Harsh, for sharing your insights. I think the audience would really appreciate and probably is appreciating the insights that you've shared on, across the value chain, what is the kind of regulations that they need to keep in mind. So just to summarize, the presentation today and some of the questions that I've been seeing on the chat, all the entrepreneurs or the participants of ISPIC are probably somewhere on the spectrum of, just plant-based or exploring cultivated or exploring fermentation or something in between, which is fine. I think what's good to understand is where you would fall with respect to the regulations. So FSSAI has standardized foods, proprietary foods, and non-specified foods. So you would, if you are using entirely standardized ingredients, which would have specified standards in the regulations in the act that FSSAI has, then you wouldn't need to apply as a proprietary food or as a non-specified food. Most plant-based meat products, if they're using standardized ingredients, would fall under the proprietary food category. So essentially your ingredients themselves are standardized, but the mix in which you're putting them in is new in some way. So it's not recognized as a product as a whole, but its individual ingredients are recognized. So you can apply under proprietary foods. The third category is non-specified foods. So FSSAI created this category when they couldn't really specify certain class of products. So they created this whole new pillar. And under that, we have novel foods, which are foods that do not have a history of safe consumption, as Harsh said, or are made through a novel technology, a new technology. So, if you're using a technology to create, cultivated meat that's not something that's been used or been recognized by FSSAI, then you're likely to apply under that subcategory of non-specified foods. Or if you're using, any sort of, if you're making any product with microorganisms, fungi, algae, etc., there's also a separate subcategory under non-specified foods. So depending on where you fall under non-specified foods, you can apply. A note here is that the non-specified food regulation is also undergoing a revamp. So they've notified a draft regulation there. So there may be certain changes in terms of what are the compliance requirements. They probably would seek more details on the food safety aspect of things. What is the testing requirements for it? Because they want to understand the safety of the product better. So FSSAI is trying to harmonize it with other geographies as well. And somebody asked on the chat about timelines. So Harsh mentioned 6 to 8 months. Typically, we can't really, standardize this because each application will be looked at individually. It's a new application, so the regulator will have to understand the intricacies really well with respect to food safety. So they would require some time to look at each application in its entirety. There's a panel that looks at your application if you're applying under non-specified foods. So 6 to 8 months is what we've seen for India, but Singapore usually takes 3 to 6 months, and they have a very advanced ecosystem for food safety. We also have EU, which takes 18 months. So it's actually, quite a lot of variability when it comes to these timelines, and FSSAI is somewhere in between. Across, the entire production process, Harsh has highlighted various regulations that you would need to be cognizant of. With respect to advertising and claims, there's ASCII, which he talked about, ASCI. Very recently, there's been a partnership between ASCI and FSSAI as well. So you can expect, FSSAI will have a more closer look at your advertising and claims, whatever claims that you're putting on your products. So while ASCII was not really able to enforce a lot of guidelines, with this partnership, FSSAI may be involved in this process more and more. So just a caveat for us to keep in mind while we're designing our advertising and thinking through what kind of claims would be on our products. And of course, there are trade regulations in case you only have products for export, or you're importing a product. There would be additional things that you would have to think through. For example, what is the HSN code, which is the harmonized system of nomenclature, or what is the kind of compliance requirements there in terms of there is a bill that you would need to have, and there are different other requirements that FSSAI has in case you're importing something. Also, if you're importing an ingredient that is novel, then you'll have to think through additional aspects of things. So we would encourage getting in touch with PLR in case you have deeper questions on these things, or you have very specific questions relating to your product. If you have more general queries, our team, our policy and regulatory team is there to help you out with that. Radhika will drop the emails on the chat. My email and Radhika and Asa's email. We are looking at the regulatory aspect of things, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Satvika, for that added context. So with that, we'll switch off the recording, and thank you everybody who's joined us. We'll move on to our private Q&A section now for the ISPIC 2021 participants. But if you're finding this useful, make sure that you like and subscribe our YouTube handle and share this session with anybody who might find it useful. Thank you so much.